Hi everyone, this is Neil with Rock Our World. I should check my voice out before I start these. My morning voice. Before I get into what I want to talk about many things, I want to encourage you again to listen to Julie Wedby's last message. And the easiest way to get it for me, and so I'll point to everyone else in that direction. Julie Wedby recently shut down her YouTube access or channel and moved to, I think it's Brighton.com. But anyway, you can get the message through the Lord is My Shepherd channel, and its title there is The King is The Door Will Shut. Now the full title that Julie gave it was The King is Coming to His Jewels and the Door Will Shut. But you just go to The Lord is My Shepherd and put in The Door Will Shut. It was posted March 30th, 2020. It's well worth going over closely. Of all the prophetic people I've pointed you towards, I would pick Julie to be right up there in the lead of someone that's hearing directly from the Lord. And of course, time will tell all these things. The Lord himself says if a prophet prophesies something and it doesn't happen, then it means he or she is a false prophet. But I would urge people to take this message very seriously. It is a message to the bride, and it tells me that there's still time to make that choice, to be obedient to the Lord. That's the simplest way that I would put it, to put yourself in a position that you would be amongst the members of the bride. And as I have been teaching for a long time, the bride is made up of 144,000 people. We see them in Revelation 7, 1-8, and then we see them further on in the book of Revelation when they're with their Lord, that is their husband. And as Julie points out, they will soon be assembled into this mighty army that is going to do absolutely amazing things on this earth. They will lead up the great harvest that's talked about in the book of Revelation. And the very sad news, as I've reported a number of times, is given by Ezekiel. Read from chapters 1-11. The very sad news is that the vast majority of believers of today will not qualify to be amongst these three groups of people. And actually, Julie's message gave me a revelation. I don't know why I didn't see this before, but in 1 Corinthians 3:10-15, which I've referred to many, many times, there are three categories there, and for whatever reason, I didn't equate them to the bride being the jewels, the bridesmaids being the gold, and then the guests to the wedding would be the silver. And the jewels don't have any dross in them. They're complete. And just like what metaphor would explain, that jewels were formed in the earth through great pressure and great intense heat, and those metaphors mean that the members of the bride have allowed the troubles and trials of this life to form their character. And that's what the Lord promises us, that through much tribulation we'll enter the kingdom. And he also promises that he will take us through many, many troubles and trials and tribulations to prepare us to mold our character. And that the easy street that some of the Christian religions and religions of this world look for, the health and wealth doctrine and things like that, that easy street doctrine is bogus. It's a lie from the devil. The devil wants us to look for that easy way to enter the kingdom of God. Anyway, the jewels are formed from the past, that is, the Lord and the members of the bride have worked together to have this character formed, whereas the gold and silver still have dross in them, and then the gold would be the bridesmaids, both the wise and the foolish. The foolish just take more refinement, and again, the refiner's fire is the metaphor. The Great Tribulation will provide that heat and intense trial, and these people waited too long. They missed the opening, and the door was shut. But that doesn't mean they don't enter the kingdom. That means they have to go through some of the tribulation until the point they either become pure or they die as a martyr, and that's again, it doesn't sound like fun, but it's there's a great reward given to those who die in martyrdom, and that's just part of what's going to happen in the years ahead, as clearly explained in the book of Revelation, and seen in the lives of all the prophets and apostles and all the men that God has used and women that God has used throughout time. That as one, it was Demas Shakarian, he said they left a trail of blood behind them. When you examine all their lives, there was no one slid into the kingdom on easy street. Then that leaves us to silver, and those will be the guests to the wedding, and as I have proposed and explained, and again remains to be seen, but putting the pieces all together, they're the ones that make it through that final trek through the wilderness of 40 years, and that the majority of the Great Tribulation is set aside for a 40-year trek, and people will, following Senior Van Rensburg's prophecies, they will be all assembled in the then expanded nation of South Africa. And you see my prop there, I have that globe behind me is centered right on the nation of Africa. And what Senior saw is that the nation of South Africa would expand right up to the equator, and the nation of Kenya, which my wife and Pat D. Buchanan and Vilna Van Beek were just there, and we had some supernatural things going on. There was a connection made with the pastors that run the Bible college there near El Dorat, Alan and Mary, and I got to talk to them yesterday. Anyway, what the Lord is doing something here, and anyway, Kenya would be part of this expanded South African nation, and that's where God is going to collect all his people, and I'm proposing it would be about 7 to 8 years from now that this world is going to continue to spiral into chaos and great tribulation, and hate to be that guy that sounds like a gloom and doomer, but remind everyone that Jesus Christ, Yeshua, must have been a gloom and doomer when he explained how the Great Tribulation unfolds in Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13. And also read all of Isaiah 24. And these are the things that we're faced immediately ahead of us. And that if you would like to escape these things, then you go back on. I've been talking about these things now for 219 episodes. Anyway, whatever the number is. I've given you all the information and advice that I can to be amongst these three groups of the first fruits. And that doesn't mean everybody else goes to hell. But the Lord wants us to run the race for the top prizes. And those are the three top prizes, to be amongst one of these three. And they're increasingly difficult, and in essence, the most difficult one has been to be the bride, but she allowed that to happen in her lifetime on this earth. So it's not something you can go back in time and redo your life of the past. We could all say there's things I could have done better, but from this moment on you can. So I've been encouraging people to do a number of things, and I've listened to this message from Julie Wedby several times now, and I think it's really important that you would take the time to do the same. And Lisa I couldn't figure out a way to get to the scriptures, but she gives us a bit of a correction that if we listen to a message but don't go through the scriptures, that we're missing an important part of the message. So anyway, I try to give lots of scriptures in my presentations, and especially the descriptions that I provide, and a reminder that it often takes me a week to complete a commentary. So take time to, if you choose to be one of my students, then take time to do these things. The same with Julie there. If you can track down, she always gives a long list of scriptures. And Pat's really good at that too, my wife, in her two books, The Pearl and Crossing the Line. She gives lots of scriptures, and make sure you have the Word of God downloaded into your heart, into your mind, and into your heart. And that can only happen through investing time, taking time to read the scriptures, to study them, to meditate upon them, to take time to fast, to worship, and ultimately we want to fine-tune our ability to hear the Lord. And that however you have developed that relationship with Him, you become familiar with. For me, it's a kind of an urge to do something. I think the first time I ever experienced it in a very strong way was in 1990. I'm going to say it was 1998, but in those years right around there, Dave Damien was putting together what was called a gathering in Winnipeg, and about 2,300 people showed up, and I knew I had to be there, my wife and I, and we did what it took, and we were very blessed to be there. My wife heard angels singing for the first time in her life, and it was a huge choir of angels. And I received a prophetic message from a Jewish prophetess. When the Spirit of the Lord came over her, she pointed at me and she said, "You will provoke the Jews to jealousy." So from that point on, I had in mind that whatever I speak is to go to both houses of Israel. Christians are the house of Israel, and the Jewish people are the house of Judah. And you can follow that history starting in 1 Kings 12, I believe, and right at the end of Solomon's reign, when the 10 lost tribes had their beginning and they rebelled against the leadership of the nation. And that's what's in their heart. Christians are rebels, and they do not take advice, they do not take direction and correction. And here we are in this late hour, and the Lord has already prophesied that, I keep saying 99.9% of us will will not listen to advice and direction, that we will become the Laodicean church. We will think we got it made in the shade, when in fact we are blind and deaf and naked and in need of healing. Anyway, what I want to do here is that today is the Sabbath day. This is Wednesday, what is it? April the 15th. Wednesday, April the 15th. And I have walked for a good long while. I think by next week it'll be 2 months I've been going through this exercise, encouraging people to begin keeping the Sabbath day. And encourage you to go back and how many episodes it takes and look at the titles and learn about how the moon divides time into the 6 working days, the Sabbath day, and the new moon festival, which occurs once every moon cycle. And it's the 1 or 2 days at the end of the cycle when we can't see the moon. It disappears on the 4th Sabbath of the cycle, and then it remains hidden for 1 or 2 days, and that is the new moon festival. And in the course of time in a year, there will be the same amount of 1-day new moon festivals and 2-day new moon festivals, but they do not alternate. The moon is very random in its orbit around the Earth. It comes close to the Earth and goes far away. It wobbles. It just has a very strange orbit. And the reason the Lord made it that way is so that we would have to watch. We cannot predict a long ways into the future. If you use Google and look up moon times and so on, you can get a pretty good indication of what it's going to be doing in the near future, but the long term cannot be predicted. And as I've said many times, when we are all gathered in these places of safety as the tribulation continues to unfold, we will not have the internet. We will have the sun and the moon in the skies, and we will have to know how to read them. And the Lord put these 2 timepieces up there right from the beginning of time. As it says in Genesis 1:14, He put the sun and the moon in their place to give us signs for the appointed times. And then in Ezekiel 45:17, the appointed times are listed: the Sabbath day, the new moon festival, and the 7 yearly festivals. So, in other words, we can find all of these appointed times from signs from the sun and moon. And just a brief addition, it does also talk about the stars giving signs, and an example of that would be April 24th, 2017, when the planet Jupiter, for the first time ever, as far back as they can see in time and as far forward as they can see in time, it was a one-time event where Jupiter went through the womb of Virgo for 9 months and then left her womb, indicating a birth, and the birth occurred on on September 24th, 2017, and that was the Day of Atonement, which is the day after the fall equinox. And not very many people knew that that was the Feast of Trumpets, because very few have taken the time to learn these things. But I've been teaching them now for these 4 years. So strong encouragement to learn the ways of the Lord, to learn the signs that the sun and the moon, God put them in the sky for many purposes, but that is one of them, to tell us when these appointed times arrive. And He doesn't mind if we get off a day or here and there. What He does mind is that we completely ignore Him, and then that we completely ignore the fact that He made these times holy. And if we're diligently seeking them, we will be right on the money or close. And He is happy with both because it blesses Him when we strive to be obedient. So I've been encouraging people to make the first step by keeping the Sabbath day. And a reminder that this final week in the moon cycle, that you go out on the 6th day, that is the 6th working day, about an hour before sunrise, and you watch for the moon. And if you get to see it, that will tell you that you're going to have a 2-day new moon, and then you will know when the first Sabbath is, the first quarter. And there is the odd time that it's hard to determine. And as I've explained, that means you're on the international date line, which moves every moon cycle, moves to a different spot on the earth, not like our system where it's always in the same place. And remember that this system we're in is Babylon. And the system that God has always asked us to be in is His system. And He provided the book of Enoch, very likely the very first book that was ever written. And it's been there for approximately 5,500 years. If somebody does the research, they can find out when Enoch, who was the 7th from Adam, the 7th generation, when he lived and did not die. He walked so closely with the Lord that he was taken to paradise without dying. And Enoch provided all this understanding for us in the book of Enoch. He gives a full disclosure of what happened when the angels rebelled. 1/3 of the angels rebelled, and that would amount to 1/3 of myriads times myriads, which who knows what that is? 10 billion? Just take a wild guess. So 1/3 of 10 billion angels, that's a lot. And they're in this final hour, they're being released upon this earth, and they're evil. So we have a lot of evil descending upon us, and our only defense is to be filled with the Spirit of God. So that is another strong encouragement to take time to ask the Lord to fill you with His Spirit. First of all, take time to ask the Lord to come into your life and take over your life, to give up trying to self-direct yourself and learn all these things. And it doesn't take a long time. In fact, the Lord has promised us that in this final hour, people will learn very quickly. All you have to do is make that first step of giving up on self-direction and give yourself wholly to the Lord. Ask Him to come into your life and direct your steps. That He gives you the wisdom. You and I do not have the ability to direct our path through life. We are too foolish. We are too limited. Our eyesight is too short. Our thinking power is too limited. And the Lord has done it all for us, and He's asking us to follow His Torah, which are His perfect teachings and instructions. And they include all these things I'm talking about, the keeping of the appointed times. And I'm urging people to begin by keeping the Sabbath day. That's the one appointed time the Lord asks us more than any other to keep. And I believe the Lord has showed me the reason is that's the starting point. When you make a decision to start keeping the Sabbath day, then God will open revelation into the understanding of all the other appointed times, which, when put together, reveal the entire plan of God, right from start to finish. And that's what we want. We want a roadmap through time. And the most critical time is the time we've just entered, the Great Tribulation. We are now in the Great Tribulation. This first round with the coronavirus is very mild compared to what's coming. directly. And many have warned that there won't be a breather in between, that the next thing will be more intense, and I don't know if that means there'll be another contagion released, or the earth will begin to shake all over with earthquakes. But if you go through Julie's message, the Lord is telling us that all these things are going to continue to intensify, and that it is His judgment upon the earth, and it's not for the evil people. The judgment begins in the house of God. The Lord is looking for His first fruits, and they will be produced by this great trial that we've now entered. And it is a full Jubilee cycle, as depicted and revealed by the counting of the 7 weeks, which we are now in. We've just completed the first week of the count of 7, today being the Sabbath day, and the last 6 working days that began on the Sabbath in the midst of the days of unleavened bread. That's what Jesus showed us when He rose from the dead. That Sabbath that's in the midst of the days of unleavened bread would be the one we begin the count from. He is the first of the first fruits. So the Lord revealed these things to us by enacting them right in front of us. And we can read all about it starting in Leviticus 23, Deuteronomy 16, Numbers 28, 29, Jubilee 6, and then read the 4 Gospels and piece together the eyewitness account of how it all unfolded. The Passover, the days of unleavened bread, and the weekly Sabbath in the midst of the days of unleavened bread. And as I've pointed out a few times, every once in a while there is no Sabbath in that 7-day period, if there's a new moon involved, and then you would pick the Sabbath that falls immediately after days of unleavened bread are over. So anyway, that is just a very brief outline of how those festivals fit together. This is an extremely important part of the year, the beginning of this count, Passover, the days of unleavened bread, and most of the believing world has it wrong. If you look on your calendar, the Jewish people had their Passover on last Thursday, I believe it was, and then they had Good Friday marked a day later, and in fact they all missed it by a week. That the Passover happens on the 14th day of the first month, and you do not use a moon calendar as the Jewish people do. That's both Enoch and Jubilees predict that this disobedience will be being enacted in these last days, that the disobedient leaders within Judaism are using a moon calendar instead of a sun calendar, as Enoch described. And then they will be keeping all of the festivals on the wrong days and missing the boat on the correct days, which are holy. So the Lord is He is the one who makes days holy or not holy. And we don't get to change those things. We simply get to be obedient or disobedient. So anyway, that's my encouragement, is that we begin keeping the Sabbath day. Today, Wednesday, is the 3rd one of the moon cycle, and then by a week from now, the moon will have disappeared on that 4th Sabbath morning. Remember that you look for the moon every day at sunrise. Sunset. Nothing like describing it backwards. I'm a little bit dyslexic. So the first 14 days of the moon cycle, you look for the moon at sunset. You'll see that it grows in the sky. It starts as a tiny sliver in the western sky. That's the first day. That's the signal that the new moon festival is over and that you are going to get up the next morning and go to work. That's the first working day of the week. Remember, God's days start and end at sunset. So you watch the moon grow for 14 days, and then you switch to watching for the moon at sunrise. And you watch it shrink for 14 days. And that is the cycle we're in right now, the part of the cycle where halfway. We see almost a perfect half in the sky this morning. Went out and took a look. We have beautiful clear sky here in southern Saskatchewan, and it was a bit before sunrise when I went out there, but it was just a bit short of a perfect half. And again, this is not exact science, but once you learn all of the rules and regulations, we'll call them, concerning the Sabbath day, that's what it says in Jubilees 50, verse 1, that there's a whole set of instructions involved in finding the 4 Sabbaths of each moon cycle, and finding the new moon festival, which lasts either 1 day or 2 days, as happened in 1 Samuel chapter 20. If you read the entire chapter, the saga of David trying to convince Jonathan that his dad Saul was trying to kill him. Jonathan didn't believe him at first, and by the end of the chapter, he believed him. He tried to kill Jonathan too. And anyway, this whole story unfolded over a 2-day new moon. So that was an example of a 2-day new moon, and it happens about half the time, and then half the time it's 1 day long. And it follows directly after the 4 Sabbaths, so there's your weekend, and half of them are long weekends. So it was God who invented the long weekend, and as it says in Amos, you don't work on the new moon festival as well as the Sabbath. So those are days that are set aside for not working. That's the most important part of keeping them holy, is you don't work. But obviously you would take time to worship God in those two. And it's men that make rules and regulations. Many people would say, well, you have to get together with believers and have a get together, and that is good, but it's not the most important thing you would do. The most important thing is you don't work on either the Sabbath or the new moon festival, and that you take time to acknowledge God and worship Him. Those would be the 2 most important things. And getting together with others, believers, would be a third, I would say the 3rd most important thing. But if you can't, make sure you do those first 2. I think I covered everything I wanted to. Again, a very strong encouragement for those who are being urged, who I'm able to speak to in your heart. And just reminded my 2 props there. We're pointing at South Africa, the collecting place that Senior van Rensburg saw back at the turn of the century, and an angel. And that angel has a scroll in its hand, and I have written on there Malachi 3:16 to 18. It's a beautiful scripture of encouragement, not only for believers who do get together and talk about the Lord, but it's a promise of protection during this great tribulation. So read that and the other number of scriptures I've given you a number of times, that there is protection promised, but there is requirements, and the most important one is that you're obedient. Obedient to what? To the Torah of the Lord, the teachings and instructions which have never changed and that always bring blessings in life. And when you disobey the Torah, it always brings curses and death. With that, I'll sign out. This is Neil with Rock Our World.